The morning the entire conference room went silent was the morning my life changed forever. I remember the sunlight pouring through the tall glass windows of the office, bright and calm like any normal weekday. People shuffled papers, laptops hummed softly, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. Everything looked ordinary on the surface. But inside that meeting room, something extraordinary was about to happen. Because in the middle of a serious company meeting, my boss suddenly slammed her hand on the table, looked straight at me in front of everyone, and shouted the words that made the entire room freeze. "I love you, you idiot." And the worst part, I had absolutely no idea why. Before we continue this emotional story, take a moment to support the channel. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and unexpected love stories, please like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who loves inspiring stories, and subscribe to Anne's Stories so you never miss another heartfelt story. My name is Adrian Hale, and for most of my life I had been a man who simply tried to survive. 5 years earlier, my world had collapsed quietly in the middle of a hospital hallway. My wife had passed away after a sudden illness, leaving me alone with our 3-year-old daughter, Mira. One moment I was a husband planning weekend trips and birthday surprises, and the next I was a single father trying to understand how to braid a little girl's hair before preschool. Life after that felt like walking through fog. Every morning began the same way. I would wake before sunrise, make oatmeal for Mira, pack her tiny pink backpack, and drop her off at daycare before rushing to work. My job at the corporate consulting firm wasn't glamorous. I was a mid-level analyst who spent most of his days staring at spreadsheets and reports. But it paid the bills. And for a single father, that was everything. Still, life inside the office felt different from everyone else's world. My coworkers talked about weekend parties, fancy dinners, and vacations. Meanwhile, my evenings were spent reading bedtime stories, fixing broken toys, and making dinosaur-shaped pancakes. I didn't mind. Mira was the reason I kept moving forward. The only complicated part of my work life was my boss. Her name was Vanessa Carver. Vanessa had taken over the department 2 years earlier, and from the first day she walked into the office, everyone knew she was different. She was confident, brilliant, and intimidating in the kind of way that made entire meeting rooms sit up straighter. But there was also something strangely warm about her. She noticed details others ignored. Like the time she saw me leaving work exactly at 5:01 p.m. every day. Most managers would have questioned my commitment. Instead, she simply asked once if everything was okay at home. I explained about Mira. After that, something about her behavior changed. Sometimes she would schedule meetings earlier in the day so I wouldn't have to stay late. Occasionally she would bring extra coffee to the morning briefing and quietly set a cup near my laptop without saying anything. Once she even arranged for the company daycare discount program after overhearing me talking about rising childcare costs. But I never thought much about it. To me, Vanessa was just a kind boss who understood responsibility. Nothing more, or at least, that's what I believed. The truth was, everyone else in the office seemed to notice something I didn't. Coworkers would exchange strange looks when Vanessa praised my reports. Some of them teased me during lunch breaks, asking joking questions about special treatment. I always laughed it off, because the idea seemed ridiculous. Vanessa Carver was a highly respected executive, who could probably have dinner with CEOs and investors every night of the week. In me, I was the tired single dad who sometimes arrived at work with applesauce stains on his sleeve. Still, looking back now, the signs were there. The first time I noticed something unusual was during a company holiday event. Employees had brought their families, and Mira had insisted on wearing a tiny red dress with glittery shoes. She clung to my hand nervously as we walked into the decorated ballroom filled with coworkers. Then Vanessa walked over. Instead of greeting executives or clients, she crouched down to Mira's level and began talking to her like they were old friends. Within minutes, Mira was giggling. By the end of the evening, Vanessa had somehow convinced the event staff to bring out extra chocolate cake for the little princess. I thought it was just kindness. I didn't realize that Vanessa spent nearly the entire night talking to my daughter. And watching me. Another moment came a few months later. Mira had gotten sick suddenly during daycare, and I received the call while working late on a deadline. I panicked, knowing I still had hours of work left and no one to pick her up. Before I could even explain, Vanessa simply closed her laptop and told me to go. The next morning when I returned to the office, the report had already been submitted. She had finished it herself. I tried to thank her, but she just shrugged like it was nothing. At the time, I thought she was just a great leader. But the biggest hint of all came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Myra's daycare had closed early due to a plumbing issue, and I had no choice but to bring her to the office. She sat quietly beside my desk drawing pictures while I worked. At one point Vanessa walked past and stopped. She stared at the drawing Mira had made. It was a simple picture of 3 stick figures holding hands. One tall man, one small girl, and one tall woman with long hair. Vanessa asked Mira who the third person was. Mira answered without hesitation, "The lady who smiles at Daddy." Vanessa's face turned red, everyone around us laughed softly. But I still didn't understand. Months passed, work continued, life continued, and somehow I remained completely blind to what everyone else seemed to see clearly. Until that meeting. It was supposed to be a routine quarterly strategy session. Executives from multiple departments sat around the long table reviewing reports and projections. The atmosphere was tense because a major client contract was at risk. Vanessa led the discussion with her usual sharp focus. But halfway through the meeting, one of the senior directors began criticizing my department's performance. His voice grew louder as he questioned my numbers, suggesting that my work had been sloppy and careless. I sat there silently, feeling the familiar pressure in my chest. Single parents don't have the luxury of losing their jobs. Every accusation felt like a stone dropping into my stomach. Then Vanessa spoke. At first her voice was calm, defending the accuracy of the report. But the director kept pushing, implying that she was protecting me unfairly. Something in the room shifted. Vanessa's patience finally snapped. She slammed her hand against the table so hard that the sound echoed across the glass walls. Everyone jumped. Her eyes locked onto me across the table, filled with a mixture of anger, frustration, and something deeper. And then she shouted the words that froze the entire room. "I love you, you idiot." The silence afterward was deafening. 20 executives sat motionless. Someone dropped a pen. My brain struggled to process what had just happened. Vanessa stood there breathing heavily, clearly realizing she had just confessed something she had been holding in for months, maybe longer. Then she looked at me again, softer this time, like a storm suddenly turning into rain. And in that moment, something inside me finally clicked. All the coffee cups, the schedule adjustments, the way she spoke to Mira, the way she watched me leave every evening, the way she finished my report that night. It had never been just kindness. It had been love. The room slowly emptied after that awkward meeting ended. No one knew what to say, so people simply gathered their papers and slipped out quietly. Soon it was just the two of us left. Vanessa sat down heavily in her chair, covering her face with her hands. For the first time since I had known her, the powerful executive looked vulnerable. She whispered that she hadn't meant to say it like that. She had planned to tell me properly someday, but watching someone attack me during the meeting had pushed her over the edge. She admitted that she had admired me for a long time, not because of my job performance, but because of the way I loved my daughter and carried responsibilities without complaining. She said seeing that kind of dedication had changed the way she looked at life. And then she laughed softly and said maybe she had been dropping hints for months. That was the moment I realized something else. In my effort to survive life's hardships, I had accidentally built emotional walls so high that I couldn't even see when someone cared about me. But standing there in that quiet room, looking at the woman who had supported me in ways I never noticed, I felt those walls finally begin to fall. Weeks passed after that meeting. Office gossip exploded for a while, but eventually people returned to their normal routines. Vanessa and I took things slowly. Very slowly, not because we were unsure, but because life had already taught us the importance of patience. The real turning point came one warm afternoon when Vanessa joined me and Mira at a park. They spent nearly an hour chasing pigeons and laughing together while I watched from a bench. At one point Mira ran over and grabbed both of our hands. And suddenly that simple stick figure drawing she made months earlier didn't feel imaginary anymore. It felt real. Before we reach the ending, I want to ask something special from all of you watching. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Anne's Stories to support more emotional stories like this. And here's a special request before the final moment of the story. Comment the word hope if you believe life can surprise us with happiness when we least expect it. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive dramatically. Sometimes it quietly waits, while we're too busy surviving to notice. The day Vanessa shouted those words in that meeting room, I thought my life was falling apart. Instead, it was finally beginning again.